He was only 14 years old when his father died suddenly in 1972. He didn't show how he felt for 53 years. Fans can't believe what they're hearing from Dan Blocker's son now that he's 67 years old. The Brooklyn Nine-Nine star talks about how Bonanza's fame changed his family's life. The crowd of fans everywhere they went. The childhood moments that were lost. The truth about how he became an actor. No one thought Hoss Cartwright's quiet son would say what he did. His birthday is December 10, 1928, and he was born in DeKalb, Texas. There was noise when he got there. He was 14 pounds when he was born. He was so big that he broke the Bowie County record. Even months later, his birth certificate had the wrong name written on it. Bobby Don Davis Blocker was written by the doctor instead of Bobby Dan Davis Blocker. His mother Mary had to go through one of the worst births in town's history. Shaq, his father, had no idea that this huge baby would grow up to be a big star on American TV. That birth was remembered. For years, people in the area talked about how no one had ever broken that 14-pound mark. The family moved to O'Donnell, a small farming town in West Texas, when Dan was 6 years old. They were upset and sad. Virginia, Dan's older sister, had died of pneumonia when she was 11 years old, just 1 year before. That day, Dan was 5 years old. The family was very sad about the death, but they had to move on with their lives. Shaq opened a shop that sells food. They lived in the back of it. Dan used to play behind the warehouse. By 5th grade, he was carrying 40-pound cow feed sacks and bagging groceries for other people. Back then, there were about 3,000 people living in the town, along with 2 drug shops, 2 doctors, and 2 lumber yards. Dan was a part of that world. He wasn't just the kid of the store, everyone knew him. People would never forget how big he was, but they would respect how hard he worked. Dan not only got taller, he also got bigger really quickly. He was 5 feet tall and 105 pounds when he was 10. He was 6 feet tall and 200 pounds when he was 12. He was bigger than most of the adults as well as the other kids. He even worked with them doing heavy work on grain trucks, silos, and other places. Main Street was even blocked off on Saturday nights so Dan could box with bigger boys. He was fighting guys in their 20s by the time he was 13. He never lost. One time he even helped a man lift his car off the ground after it fell off a jack. There was no question that he could do it, whether it was true or not. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall and 275 pounds by high school, and 14.5-inch war shoes. His dad would say that Dan wasn't very useful because he was too big to ride and too small to pull a wagon. But he would become famous very quickly because of that size. Dan's folks put him in the Texas Military Institute in San Antonio when he was 12 years old. Some people may have thought that the discipline would make him more than just big. General Douglas MacArthur was trained at the same school. Dan learned how to be organized, tough, and focused. It would all help him in the long run. In 1946, after leaving TMI, he went to Hardin-Simmons University. There he played football. Because of his size, he was good at it. Those who played with him looked up to him because he was 18 years old, strong, fast, and built like a tank. But his life wouldn't go in the direction of football. That took place at Sul Ross State. In 1947, he moved there and agreed to help out behind the scenes of a school play. Someone had to be strong enough to carry fake dead bodies for the show, which was poison and old lace. Dan agreed, and something made sense. He felt something deep inside when he moved those props, was around the players and watched it all come together. He quickly saw a new way to go. The subject he was studying changed from PE to theater. The football player became an actress all of a sudden. Dan played football at Sul Ross, but theater took over his life. He did different jobs. To pay for school, he did shows at rodeos and bounced in bars. On stage, he had a reason to live. A lot of people were surprised by how kind and sensitive he was, even though he was the right size for the parts. His teachers saw it. People in his class clapped for him. He earned his degree in speech and acting in 1950. Everyone thought he would become a sports star. He chose something harder instead, something that wasn't a sure thing. Deals from major football teams came in. Promoters for boxing also called. Dan said no, though. He didn't want to make a living with his arms or just being big. What did he want? He wished for art. He went to Boston for summer stock theater that same year. 1950. He didn't know anyone there because it was 2,000 miles away from Texas. He did take a chance, though. He was in plays every week. He didn't get paid much. He picked up lines quickly and played many parts. It was hard work, but he got everything he wanted. Dan Blocker thought he was going to become an actress in Boston, but things didn't go as planned. He was called up by the U.S. Army in November 1950. As the Korean War got worse, Blocker, who was over 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed more than 250 pounds, was called up. It wasn't easy to dress a man that big. The Army spent a whole month looking for boots that were big enough for his 14.5-foot feet. Blocker was sent to Japan after training in Louisiana. Then right to the front lines in Korea in December 1951. He joined the 45th Division's F Company 2nd Battalion 179th Infantry Regiment. Right away the men there called him the Big Un. It was quick to fight. His unit was dropped into the cold ditches along the Jamestown line. The days were filled with snow, mud, and bullets. Blocker came in as a private. He was there but not for long. Because of how well he led, he was quickly moved to corporal, then sergeant, and finally master sergeant. Everything went by quickly. He didn't just do what he was told, he led. Blocker was in battle for a total of 209 days. For him, Christmas Eve 1951 was one of the worst times in his life. Blocker and his team were stuck on Hill 255 for 10 hours. It was cold, dark, and dangerous. Things got even worse on May 25, 1952. 6 Americans died and 21 were hurt while protecting Hill 200. However, the unit also killed 132 enemy troops. The Blocker fought through ambushes and shelling from mortars. During one very bloody fight, he was shot while trying to help his friends who were hurt. He got a Purple Heart for what he did, but it also changed him. He had seen too much. He spoke out against war, especially the Vietnam War, after he got home. It was clear to him. After what he had been through, he didn't want American bombs to fall on harmless people. But the war also showed another side of Blocker. He could lead when things got tough. He helped plan and lead searches through dangerous areas like Porchop Hills. Camp Old Baldy. One time his team walked right into a trap. They were surrounded and far into enemy territory. Blocker didn't run away though. He stayed calm and led the fight back. His big body helped him take hurt people to safety. But it also made him easy to hit. He never gave up though. He had won a lot of awards by the time his unit was moved out in July 1952. The Combat Infantryman Badge, the Korean Presidential Unit Citation, the Korean Service Medal with 2 battle stars, and more were given to him. He got out of the Army on September 24, 1952. He married Dulphia Lee Parker, the woman he loved during the war, 2 days after that. They had been writing to each other from Korea and now they were together for good. In Carlsbad, New Mexico, they had a small wedding. I went back to school that same week at Sul Ross State Teachers College. He picked up where he left off and got his master's in music theater. She still wanted to be an actress, but she had to pay her bills first. In Sonora, Texas, he began teaching high school English and theater. They remembered how his deep voice could be heard in the halls. Most of all when he read Shakespeare. Dan Blocker came to Carlsbad, New Mexico after teaching for a year in Sonora. He taught 6th grade there and also coached at Eddy Elementary School. He never gave up his love for playing even when he was a teacher. He kept his love of theater alive by using his classroom as a stage. Then something strange happened. Back in the summer, Blocker and his family took a trip from Sonora to Hollywood. It wasn't supposed to be a job search. They were supposed to be on vacation, but things didn't go as planned. A talent agency saw Blocker making a call at a phone booth while he was dressed like a cowboy, heeled boots, a flashy shirt, and a big straw hat. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall and looked like he was straight out of a Western movie. The agency didn't need a script. He only had to look at Blocker once to know that he was made for TV. Blocker's wife and children were waiting in their station wagon, but they had no idea that everything about their lives was about to change. Everything was set up perfectly. At that time, Blocker looked like the real deal. Hollywood was full of horse shows in the late 1950s. He was the perfect fit for the job because of his Texas roots, his size, and his rough charm. That chance meeting on the sidewalk led to the start of something very big. Blocker didn't move to California to become famous though. Before he got his PhD in 1956, he went to Los Angeles to study at UCLA. He took school very seriously. He worked as a substitute teacher in Glendale schools while he was in school to help support his family. He had 4 kids. In 1953, twin girls Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn were born. Then came David in 1955 and Dirk in 1957. Things were busy. Despite having classes, working, and being a dad, he was able to keep everything in check. Dan Blocker wasn't famous at first. His role as the goon in the 1957 Three Stooges short film Outer Space Jitters was very scary. In the silly sci-fi comedy, he was only known as Dirk Blocker and not by his real name. He was over 300 pounds, 6 feet 4 inches tall, and dressed as an alien. Blocker used his size to get people's attention right away in this short movie, which was only 17 minutes long and shot in just 2 days. It was even used in a silly Three Stooges skit. In 1956, a year before that, he played a bartender in The Sheriff of Cochise. That was his first time on TV. He changed roles a lot. He played a cavalry captain on Gunsmoke in 1956. After 2 years, he went back to the same show but played a different part. He had also been in Have Gun, Will Travel, and Colt. 45 by that time. There were a lot of westerns with him in 1957 alone. He played tough guys, criminals, or police officers in movies like The Rifleman and Cheyenne. Even though these roles weren't very exciting, they got him known. People thought of the big man with the deep voice. Maverick then showed up. Everything changed for him after that show. He played a part called Hognose Hughes. Blocker said it was the most important part of his early career after the fact. Even though it was a western, Maverick was different. That was funny and smart, and Blocker fit right in. He was funny as well as big. Agents and producers saw then that he could be both charming and tough. The way Hoss Cartwright was shaped by the mix between comedy and drama would become clear over time. But it was Hognose Hughes who first made that finding. In 1958, he got a recurring part in A Different Place in Western Samar. He was tiny. The show only ran for 1 season, but it brought him together with someone who would change his life. David Dort was in charge of making Samaran City. People he knew from earlier work, like when Blocker played a blacksmith on The Restless Gun and a cattleman in another episode. He thought what he saw was good. Because of this, he knew who he wanted for his new show about a family of farmers in the American West. The people who made Bonanza didn't know who would play most of the parts when they first started working on the show in 1959. One thing was clear though, it was written for Dirk Blocker to play Hoss Cartwright. No one else was even tried out by the makers. They knew what they had. They were right too. The show began slowly, being ranked 45th out of 100. Blocker's play though helped turn things around. The show slowly moved up the charts. After a few years, it was the most watched TV show in the United States. Hoss wasn't supposed to be a serious figure at first. He was meant to be the big slow guy just for fun. Someone who didn't say much but could really punch. He was written to be simple and even stupid. He wasn't like that at all though. He was 6'4" inches and weighed more than 300 pounds or 365 pounds by the end of the season. But behind that size was a man with a master's degree. He had taught English. He had meant to get a PhD. He brought all of that to the part. He didn't play Hoss as stupid, instead he made him seem intelligent, kind, and full of heart. And the writers saw it. They began to change Hoss to match Blocker. He went from being funny to being the show's heart and soul. By the second week of the 3rd season, when Bonanza was ranked 2nd, everyone loved Hoss. He was more than just a big guy. He had the moral guide and helped people remember what the Cartwrights were really fighting for. But the show was really rough behind the scenes. Today TV shows only make 10 or 12 episodes a year, but Bonanza made more than 30 episodes a year. That meant working 14 hours a day, 5 days a week, almost non-stop. There was no way Dirk Blocker could leave until 9 at night. He had to be there at 7 in the morning. It was a lot with the heat, the outfits, the writing, and the stunts. It was really hot for a man his size. He would pass out sometimes, but he kept going. He said that he saw his TV family more often than his own wife and 4 kids. He had made 415 shows by the time 1972 came around. Those hours would kill most artists these days. The fact that Blocker gave up something makes his story even more sad. He had big plans for a long time before Bonanza. Not for glory, but to become a teacher one day. He was a teacher after getting his master's degree in Texas. He taught English and theater to kids as young as 6th grade. He didn't move to California for Hollywood either. It was for UCLA. He aimed to get a PhD. That was his real dream. I learned to act by accident. He got into the business after someone saw him dressed as a cowboy. He didn't quit school right away, even after getting the part in Bonanza. In early talks he said that he planned to balance classes and filming, but it became impossible over time. It took up all of my time to remember lines, shoot all day, and do interviews. He stopped going to school in 1961 and never got the chance to go back. In the end, he said that not getting his PhD was the worst thing he ever did. Even so, what he did for TV can't be forgotten. Hoss was more than just a kind cowboy. He was a real person who made people feel something. By the mid-1960s, research showed that viewers saw Hoss as the show's emotional center. As Blocker once said, "Let us do it now, for we will never pass this way again." This is what he thought of when he played Hoss. He really meant it both on and off screen. In the 1960s, there was only one show that people watched all the time. Bonanza was more than just a hit. A whole country did it. It was the best show in the country from 1964 to 1967. On Sunday nights at 9 p.m., almost 19 million homes watched. There are 36.3 rating shares there. It went from 45th to 2nd and then to 1st in just a few seasons. Bonanza was in the top 5 for 9 years in a row. That had never been done on any other show. It wasn't just America either. People watched the Cartwright family in almost 50 countries, including Saudi Arabia, Canada, Brazil, France, Thailand, and even Brazil. Not until 1967 did CBS finally find something that could beat it. The Smothers Brothers show of funny videos. Even Judy Garland's show couldn't make a difference before that. Blocker didn't just play a cowboy, though. In a way, he became one. During the early days of Bonanza in 1963, he opened a real restaurant. The name of it was the Bonanza Sirloin Pit. It was in Westport, Connecticut for the first one. Inside a 1925 Greyhound bus stop. It worked out. The name was known. They had faith in it. In 1966, Sam and Charles Wiley, two brothers, bought the name and quickly grew it. Then in 1965, 3 more guys in Indiana opened a chain like that one. It was known as Ponderosa Steakhouse. Until 1989, both companies kept getting bigger when they were bought by Metro Media. It had about 600 businesses by that time. In 1997, the two chains joined together, but they kept their old names. By 2019, there were only about 75 sites left. Still, Blocker had made his TV fame into a real business that people could go into, sit down, and taste. The movies he was in kept going. They were in Come Blow Your Horn Together in 1963. There was Neil Simon in it, and it worked. It was one of the best movies that year and made $12.7 million. Then for Lady and Semin in 1968, Blocker and Sinatra worked together again. It was a crime story this time. A dangerous businessman named Rudy Kosterman was played by Blocker. The movie made me think of Dirty Lively Miami in the 1960s. People didn't see what was going on off-screen. All 4 of Dan Blocker's kids took karate lessons from a man named Chuck Norris before he became popular during the show's peak years. They trained with the kids of Michael Landon. The actors were like family to each other. Blocker got married to Dolph Parker in 1952. They dated until he died in 1972 after meeting in college. David is their son. He became a director and won an Emmy in 1998. Dirk also became an actress. He spent time with his family. That didn't change when he became famous. After the fact, Mitch Vogel, who played Jamie on Bonanza, said that Dan was the kind of guy you could grab a beer with. On TV, Dan Blocker was always seen as the nice big guy. A lot of people loved the part he played as Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza. But what no one saw was how hard it was for him in the background. He was about 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed about 300 pounds. His size made him look strong on screen, but it was also bad for your health. Dan had been having health problems for a while before he died in May 1972. His stomach was giving him trouble, but no one around him knew how bad it was. Today's gallbladder surgeries are quick and low risk, even for bigger people according to doctors. But things were very different in the past. Things were not as advanced in 1972 in terms of tools and methods. Some people think he might have lived if he had the same surgery 10 years later. But he was bigger back then, which made everything more scary. He didn't tell anyone else about it. He smiled on screen. He was slowly losing a quiet battle away from the camera. I got word that Dan got a new job 2 months before he died. It could have changed his whole future. For The Long Goodbye, Dan was chosen to play the lead part by Robert Altman, who had worked with him before. It was a hard part. A writer who is emotionally broken and drunk, not at all like the kind Hoss. Dan could show everyone that he was more than just a nice cowboy. But that didn't happen by chance. Sterling Hayden took over the part after Dan died. He did a great job. During shooting, he even made up lines while he was drunk. He never got over losing Dan though. He even considered calling off the whole show. Rather than stopping, he kept going and added a tribute to the credits, this time focusing on Dan Blocker. The people who worked with him loved that one line. He passed away on May 13, 1972. It began as a simple surgery to remove the liver. But quickly things went badly. Dan got a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot in his lungs. After the surgery, he was having trouble breathing. A lot of nurses ran down the halls. There was a code blue. They did everything they could to save him, but his heart stopped at 4:10 a.m. He was only 43 years old. His death was very sad. Fans were shocked. Within hours, news stories were seen all over the country. It shocked everyone. When he died, he left behind 4 children: Deborah and Dana, twin girls, and David and Dirk, a son. She also had to deal with the press. 3 days later, his funeral took place, and thousands of people who loved Hoss came, including friends, co-stars, and strangers. Michael Landon said a few words that were very powerful. "We laughed at him. He made us better." Dan was buried in a small cemetery in Texas, a long way from Hollywood. But his death was never forgotten. When Dan died, Bonanza was already in its 13th season. It was still going strong after more than 10 years of running. However, Hoss's death left a huge hole in the middle of the show. The numbers dropped like a rock. People stopped to look. As producer Richard Collins put it, "Just as we lost something, the audience lost something too." People watched a lot of the first show of season 14 because they were interested. People who watched dropped by almost 40% after that. NBC said that changing the show to Tuesday nights was partly to blame for the drop. That wasn't true though. People missed Hoss. They didn't want to watch Bonanza without him. It was true. Even Lorne Greene, who played Ben Cartwright. That's all he told his wife. The job is done. He was right too. The show was canceled by NBC in November. The last show aired on January 16, 1973. Bonanza was over after 14 years and 431 episodes. There is a quiet spot in the middle of O'Donnell, Texas, where people still remember a man who was liked by many. You might not notice the city if you are not looking for it. But that tall thing there is a metal bust of Dan Blocker, who everyone knew as Hoss Cartwright. It was unveiled on July 4, 1973, which was only 14 months after Dan's death. He was only 43 years old. The plaque's words say it all: Hoss Cartwright will live because of movies. But the world doesn't get to keep a Dan Blocker nearly often enough. The figure is on a spot that used to be empty land. It used to be next to his dad Shaq Blocker's shop. Dan, who was known as Bobby Dan back then, used to help out when he was a kid. The O'Donnell Heritage Museum is in the old bank house across the street. It looks the same today as it did back in 1925. There is a room on the second floor that is all about Dan's life. At 14 pounds, he was the heaviest baby ever recorded in Bowie County when he was born. Every piece tells a part of his story, from his birth to becoming one of America's favorite TV stars. And as you enter O'Donnell on Highway 87, a big painting of him on the side of a barn stands out as a proud memory. A gentle giant was born in this town. Dennis Dirk Blocker was born in Los Angeles on July 31, 1957. He is his son. He first got into show business when he was a child. He and his dad were in an ad for a car, at the age of 7. After that, everything changed. Dirk didn't give up after losing his father when he was only 14. In just 2 years he was already playing on TV. He first showed up on Marcus Welby, Maryland. In 1974, when he was 16 years old. He got a steady part on the show Baba Black Sheep when he was 19. Between 1976 and 1978, he played Officer First Class Jerry Bragg. After that, Dirk's success grew in a quiet way. He was in the movies Poltergeist, 1982 and Starman, 1984, as well as old TV shows like MASH and The X-Files. He even played a reporter in 2 movies that came after Bonanza: Bonanza the Return and Bonanza Under Attack. But his big break didn't come until much later. He started working on Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Detective Hitchcock when he was 56. He was in 147 shows from 2013 to 2021. He became known to a whole new generation, not as Hoss's son but as a great comedic actor in his own right. At age 66, Dirk has begun to talk about what it was really like to be Dan Blocker's son. He remembers how everyone knew about his dad's fame. Fans would swarm them in public. That made Dirk want to do something else. He never wanted to be famous. He went in a different direction by becoming a character actor and staying out of the press. He moved out of the spotlight, but he was always in the shade of his father. There was always a mix of pride and pressure. He wanted to show that he could do it on his own and respect Dan's memory. He's talked about how strange it was to see his dad on TV and remember the man who put him to bed every night. Not many people get to grow up seeing everyone else love someone they miss every day. Everything changed when Dan died suddenly in 1972. Dirk was in his teens. He was changed by the loss, which hurt him deeply and stuck with him. The most important thing to Dirk was the way his father lived his life. Not only was Dan Blocker a TV star, he was also a good, humble person. A lot of people on set talked about how nice he was instead of how good someone else was. He wasn't a star, he behaved like a good person who was on TV. He was honest, and Dirk picked it up. He saw how his famous father balanced family and fame, and how he stayed grounded even though he had one of the most famous TV parts.